Today is July 15, and you are watching the Norwood Finance Commission on Norwood Community Media. Our meeting is virtual. It is live this evening on NCM. This is an open meeting. Those who wish to access this meeting can do so through the posting of this meeting on the town's website under calendar. I will proceed with a roll call of attendees. Bob Wanley.
Here.
Judy Langone.
Here.
Judy.
Here.
I'm here.
Kelly Newmy.
Here.
Alan Slater.
Here.
Tom McQuaid.
Here.
Emily Chambers.
Here.
We have guests, Representative John Rogers, Selectman Bill Plasko, Selectman David Ajah, Tony Mizuko, General Manager, and Chief Brooks from the Police Department, and Teresa Stewart from the School Committee, Chair of the School Committee, and Michael Thornton. Welcome, everyone, for being with us tonight. First thing up on our agenda is the acceptance of the minutes from June 29th, 2020.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? We'll do a roll call. Kelly Newmy.
Aye.
Judy Langone.
Yes.
Alan Slater.
Yes.
Bob Donnelly.
Abstain.
Thank you, Bob. So this brings us to our guest, Representative John Rogers. The school committee and the finance commissioners had submitted several questions about probably the state of the state and how the state of the state is influencing the town of Norwood. Representative Rogers, I'll hand this off to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chairman, honorable members of the commission, honorable members of the board, Tony, Chief. It's important that we continue communicating like this so that we have an update on not only state revenues, but federal revenues as well, federal forms of relief. FY20 was a robust year for the Commonwealth throughout the months of January and February, and even into March. Even after Governor Baker declared a state of emergency, we saw major increases in income tax, about 27% over the prior fiscal year. We saw major increases, about 25% in sales tax, which is our second largest source of tax revenue for the Commonwealth, and major increases in corporate excise tax, which is our third largest source of money for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Predictably, in April, the Commonwealth suffered severe losses. It was almost in reversed percentages, about 30% loss in withholding and income taxes, about 29% losses in sales tax. A lot of that was because of closed restaurants, closed other entities. A lot of people laid off, less income taxes coming into the coffers. And even in the month of June, those numbers were even worse. The overall tax losses for the month of June over the prior year was 33%. It was about 32% loss of income taxes, 29% loss in sales, 33% loss in corporate excise tax, and all the other forms of taxation in the Commonwealth suffered some 55.5% loss over the prior calendar year. And a lot of that was deeds excise, a lot of that was alcohol and tobacco taxes, And that was due primarily to shutting down the Boston Garden, Celtics, Bruins, even Fenway Park in the early parts of this month. So we're in phase 3 now. Commonwealth consumers are beginning to spend money. Good news is we're only 2 weeks into FY21. But what the House and the Senate will do in the next month or so will be largely dependent upon what the United States Congress does. I've been in constant communication with Congressman Steve Lynch, spoke earlier this week with Senator Markey. They feel pretty confident that the United States Senate will take up the HEROES Act, which is a $3 trillion spending program in about 7 different areas. The one that concerns me the most, that I think would be most helpful to the town of Norwood, would be the spending program that essentially would hold the several states harmless for this current fiscal year. We're looking at probably about a $6 billion hole for the Commonwealth to make up. A lot of that will have to, when we close out FY20 sometime, I'm going to guess in October, a lot of that money will have to be, or some of that money will have to be plugged in through the stabilization account, which stands at about $3.5 billion. So that's the good news. Massachusetts has a healthy stabilization account. I wish personally it was about $4.5 billion, but I'll take $3.5 billion as a healthy reserve. But if the Congress, and I think I heard news out of Senator Mitch McConnell's office earlier today, that Senator McConnell is receiving internal pressure within his own caucus to do at least 3 of those spending programs. Again, the only one I'm concerned is the one that holds states harmless. That would enable us to get through FY21. At the same time, I continue to urge my colleagues in the House and Senate to fully fund the Student Opportunity Act. I think we can. I think we should. And maintain our commitment to K through 12 public education, hold local aid harmless, spare our veterans programs and services and tax expenditures, as well as public safety and senior citizens. So those 4 areas of the budget, I think, can be spared as we maneuver our way through FY21. But it means the 500 other line items in the state budget are on consideration for cuts. Hopefully we don't have to do that if the Congress comes to our relief. The other thing that we're up against, Madam Chair, is our July 31st deadline. I don't think we do any of this in the next 16 days. We just closed out the tax year of the filing deadline as of midnight tonight. So we're not going to have a complete picture of what next year ending June 30th, 2021 will look like, unless probably for about another week until we hear back from the Department of Revenue as to what has come in as far as this tax year is concerned, the 2019 tax year for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as a foundation and as an economic indicator looking forward, so we can responsibly build an FY21 budget that meets the statutory requirement in Chapter 29 to have a balanced budget. So tomorrow, I'll be sending a letter to my colleagues in the House and the Senate urging them to consider either suspension of Joint Rule 12A, which we hardly ever do. I don't think we've done it once since its enactment, which enables the legislature to go take up full formal sessions after the July 31st deadline, or to consider adoption or action under Joint Rule 26. That's a House and Senate rule that enables a majority of the House and a majority of the Senate to adopt a resolution to come back at a date certain to consider certain items. One of them would be an FY21 state budget. I think the better thing to do is to suspend Joint Rule 12A, gives the legislature far more flexibility. I would propose not going any later than October 1st, because that would frustrate the purpose of the fundamental reason why the House and Senate adopted House Rule 20 years ago. We did 12A to prevent the lame duck sessions. October 1st gets us before the November elections, but it also is consistent with the start of the new fiscal year for the United States Congress. So I think all those dynamics being in place, I think there's a lot of pressure on the Congress right now to inform the several states, to inform the Commonwealth of Massachusetts on what type of relief they will put on the president's desk and what type of relief we as a Commonwealth, we as a town can expect.
Does, well, I think everybody's a little speechless, John. So it seems that it could be a while before we get any kind of an idea of really where we're at financially and what we can expect from the state.
That's right, and it would, I mean, it'd be disingenuous if I advised this evening that, you know, we're going to have a budget in place before July 31st. I just don't see that, particularly since the Congress is more likely to act now. Now, I've been speaking with Congressman Lynch about the HEROES Act for more than 2 months now, and you know, if you ask me if it was going to pass the Senate, I'd harbor no grand illusions that that would be the case. You're talking about a $3 trillion spending package. I think what unites our Congress is the other smaller items, and I hate to call a $500 billion relief package to our several states a small item, but in the whole vast scheme of things, it is, and it would mean close to $6 billion for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I'm hopeful that that's going to happen. In the meantime, I know I spoke with Madam Chair on the school committee front, you know, not to give up the fight on the Student Opportunity Act. I mean, here we were the day before Thanksgiving. We're at the English High School. I'm a member of a guest of my friend Marty Walsh and Governor Baker, and we're signing the Student Opportunity Act. Something we've been working on for 7 years now to get fully funded. And as I said before the school committee in late January, before the pandemic, was that I have this healthy institutional mistrust that my colleagues in the House and the Senate will maintain the commitments under that. Now, there are no small commitments. $303 million more for Chapter 70. That would be about an 18.75% increase to Norwood Public Schools, on top of a 21% increase in the current fiscal year, which we are maintaining. For members of the board, so far, the Commonwealth has maintained its commitment for unrestricted general government aid. House 2 that the governor filed back in January maintains the increase of 2.8% in that regard. so that it's the same rate of consensus revenue growth, consensus revenue figure that we adopted in January 2019. Fixing the formula has taken years. The Chapter 70 formula has taken years. I tried to do it when I was the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. The Senate would never adopt it. It's very difficult to do. What we were able to do was put together the Foundation Budget Review Commission, which showed that the Chapter 70 formula is flawed. It's flawed in two major regards. One is assumption of percentage of SPED students in the school districts. The other is the cost of healthcare costs of both existing educators in the system and retirees. This formula fixes those two problems in Chapter 70. We should not now retreat. And I would argue legally we cannot retreat from that commitment under McDuffie versus Robertson and under Hancock versus Driscoll. I think we have a constitutional obligation to fully fund the foundation budget level, but also to maintain our commitments to fully fund the SPED circuit breaker, which would cost $362 million, an additional $12 million over FY20, and to fully reimburse charter school reimbursements. The other thing we've been fighting for years is to include transportation costs that local school districts incur into the circuit breaker formula, so that school districts can get to that circuit breaker and get reimbursed quicker with more money. The Student Opportunity Act, for the first time ever, finally includes transportation in school districts. So
I think you're breaking up
it
a
would
little
take us
bit.
back a generation. We would, I'm urging, I sent out a letter 2 days.
John, you're breaking up a little bit.
To maintain the commitment to this that I could consider, perhaps.
John?
$1 extra
John,
to
I
do
don't know
school
what,
modernization.
excuse me, John. I do not know what's going on, but for some reason or other, you're fading out, and we're in the last couple of sentences that you said, we have not been able to understand. So if you wouldn't mind repeating yourself a little bit, that would help. No, we're not getting anything. Okay. Thank you, John. For the moment, we'll just see what we can do with the information that you gave us. Can we try some maybe questions and answers? Sure, Kelly. Kelly?
So, yep, I'm here. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Representative Rogers, for being here. It's really appreciated to share the state of the state's finances. One of the main questions I have is I've read a lot or been doing a lot of research on the aid packages that are being proposed by the federal government, but some of them are coming with strings attached in terms of, you know, forcing school reopenings and things that might not necessarily make sense from a Board of Health perspective. What have you heard with regards to that in Massachusetts potentially being left out of receiving aid because we wouldn't necessarily follow guidelines?
John, do you have an answer for that? Can you answer that?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So that was the question actually I had communicated with Dr. Thompson about, and I mean the long and the short of it is that, you know, we understand that there are current threats from the Department of Education and presidential administration regarding cutting off federal funds for schools that don't comply with the return to full-time school. But as I understand it from talking with Dr. Thompson, is that is a federal program that has been implemented by Congress, by legislation, and that ultimately it does not appear that the Department of Education would have the authority to withhold those funds.
Thank you. John, did you want to continue? Can you? Hi.
Madam
Okay,
Chair?
yes.
So one thing, as we're waiting for John's feed to come in better. So as I understand it from John's report, it does not appear that the state would have.
I'm having difficulty hearing the speaker.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess my question is, John, I guess as you stated, that October 1st might be the extended deadline for a state budget to be produced. And this is more of a question for us, I guess, in the town. How does that impact our timing for an annual town meeting to consider further our FY21 budget? From a timing perspective, I don't believe that a September meeting would be workable if we still don't have state action by that time.
Correct. In the state, it will be working on the 1/12 budget. Am I correct? Anybody? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Judy?
Yes, yes. My question would be on the 1/12 budget, and early on I was told we're going to be at least 2 to 3, maybe 4 months into a 1/12. But, I'm sitting here thinking, well, that's all well and good. That's 1/12 of the previous year. Well, do we even have enough money to support a 1/12? I mean, the state, and I know we seem to be in a better shape, per Tony, and I just don't know if we don't have the money, how are we even going to take care of a 1/12? Maybe Tony has that answer.
So in brief, it's important to remember that the Commonwealth continues to collect taxes and they continue
That's
to collect
true.
revenue. If you're looking at 5 or 6 months out of a 1/12 budget, if you're not fundamentally collecting the same revenues, you're going to start to have problems down the road. What you will see is some of these items drop precipitously and some will climb back up. You're seeing these wide swings in unemployment and wide swings in sales tax. The challenge is it depends. Nobody knows where we're going to be in 3 months. It's like the school opening question. Our numbers right now are great in Massachusetts. Our numbers are not what are going on in Texas or Florida. If we had numbers like that, we probably wouldn't even be having Zoom meetings right now, let alone anything in person. So money keeps coming in, money gets collected. September we can do, October we can do. At some point, we'll settle a budget on an estimated state number and they'll come in and do something. But the longer you push that out, the risk you run is your end of the year, you start making devastating cuts later because you can't cut them earlier. The easiest example is if you have a salaried position and it's $1,000 a week on that salary, you can cut that at the beginning of the year and save $50,000. But when you make that decision 6 months of the year, the body only saves you half that. So the longer you wait to make your adjustments, the more difficult it becomes.
You entered no digit.
One moment, please, Alan, you're next, but just to let everybody know, if somebody has something playing in the background, that makes it hard for everybody to hear. So if you please make sure that you have things shut off, like TVs and phones and things, I would appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Slater.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, as John indicated, that one of the key aspects of this whole discussion and this whole debate we're having is what happens whether we're going to get any additional money from the federal government to.
Hey, Tony, do you have control of the meeting to mute everybody that's not speaking?
The states, not only Massachusetts, but the other states. I tend to agree that, $3 trillion act, is certainly something that may be difficult for a lot of people to vote for, but clearly, there are certain areas of that somewhat easier for senators of different, political bents to justify, such as the aid to the state. So I would think that something like that, would be decided in the summer. It's not going to last until October, because that's right in the middle of election season. They want to get out there and campaign. So I would think that if anything is coming out of the federal government, it would probably come out within the next month or so. I would think by the end of August, and that'll give us an indication of what the state will expect. It'll certainly give the legislature an indication of what they could expect in the federal government, and put them in the position, hopefully before October, where they can make a decision on the FY21 budget, and give us the idea of how much money we're going to get, so we could complete our budget deliberations and have our fall town meeting. So it's not out of the woods that we're going to have an October town meeting yet. Let's see what happens on the federal side, and that's going to govern, I think, what's going to happen on the state side.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Mr. McQuaid.
Madam Chair, I did text John Rogers and asked him to log in. He is on now.
Okay, thank you. He is. Where is he? John, please answer.
Yes,
Okay, thank you, John.
but that's even better because I have a face for radio anyway.
Oh, all right. Okay, we got a little sidetracked here, but we started discussing the state going into using, or state using a 1/12 budget, and how long you thought that the state would be on that 1/12 budget, and what impact it would have on the towns.
Well, I mean, I think hopefully we don't have to use it a third time, but it's likely we're going to have to use it as a tool the second time, if the idea is to await word from our federal counterparts as to relief packages. So whatever services that the money that the state appropriated in FY20 still to continue to pay for those services. That money's not going to diminish. It just takes their last fiscal year and cuts it in 1/12 and backs it forward. So I'm not suspecting a major significant impact to the town. That also includes a 21% increase in Chapter 7.
So that money will still be in there.
Yes.
Okay. And you were talking, this is for me. I'm sorry, Judy, have you got a question?
Yeah, I just like John's. There been any discussion with the state on furloughs? I'm not talking layoffs, furloughs, which was very successful many years ago when we were in very dire straits as a state.
Yeah, we did that after the 9/11 recession. We did it during the Great Recession in 2008 and 2009. There hasn't been any, there's always backup plans, Judy, but, there's no active ongoing groups or discussion or subcommittees of either Ways and Means Committee, actively considering furloughs or even layoffs. But if the federal government doesn't, come through, then, Plan B goes into effect. But right now, I'm not hearing a lot of discussion about that in the House or the Senate.
Well, I know I was a recipient of furloughs back in the days, and the Commonwealth did not pay us, but guaranteed us extra vacation time, or when we retired, it would be an IOU when you want to retire. So really, it's not really a total disaster, but it does give the Commonwealth, and in fact, the town, some playroom that they may not have right now.
Correct.
All right. Any,
And far as, I think, Madam Chair, someone asked, there was a discussion and my, it was breaking up with regard to federal money being tied to, going back to school right away. And I was on the phone yesterday with the Massachusetts Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley, and on the call was two doctors, Dr. Sammy Nelson, who's an expert on infectious diseases, Mass General, and she also serves on the board of Harvard Medical School, and another doctor, Dr. Lloyd Fisher, who's president of the Massachusetts chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And, they share the good news that, Massachusetts has among the lowest transmission rates in the country, that young children are at least a low risk of contracting the virus and lower risk of transmitting the virus. And that's all the good news. The troubling news is that they're urging cautious reopening, and they're asking all school districts to have their reopening plans submitted to DESE by the next 16 days, so by July 31st. And then I think school districts by August 10th will have opportunity to submit its preferences. But it's based upon a three-pronged approach of in-person, traditional learning, remote learning, and a hybrid of both. So that is something that I wish the school districts, the 403 school systems across the Commonwealth, could have had earlier indications on that. But I know that data rather than dates are driving the reopening of our public schools in Massachusetts.
Great. Kelly, you have a question?
So, yes, I do. So my question, thank you very much, Representative Rogers. My question was more along the lines of the packages that are being talked about in the federal government. There's a lot of talk about them being linked to following certain standards that might be issued by the Federal Board of Education that I really highly doubt that the Massachusetts Board of Education or our governor would follow, because they don't seem to necessarily put student safety first. So my question was, how likely are we to be left out of this package that's going to be generated by the federal government because we won't comply with standards that we don't deem as safe?
Yeah, no, my comments and conversations with Congressman Lynch have expressed that concern, and that if you offer to relieve the states and it's an offer that they cannot accept, it's really no offer of relief at all.
So John, I was just going through these questions that we had sent to you, and we asked you about when did you anticipate a full budget from the state? Is the House considering adjustments to the revenue sources to close the budget gap? I think you sort of alluded to the budget gap here and the percentages. The rainy day fund, you mentioned that earlier and it was a little garbled. If you could go over that for a moment, and the impact to the rainy day fund.
Correct. I fought for a reform years ago had a trade for it with Senate spending, but it was basically to set aside 10% of the budgeted revenue in the stabilization account, that we should have 10% in the reserves at all times, especially during the good times. That would bring us up to about $4.5 billion. We've never been at 10%. The reason why I'm speaking of 10% is because in 1990, when the state had a $12 billion state budget, we had a $1.2 billion budget gap. And if we had that 10% in reserves, we could have plugged that hole, at least for that fiscal year. But I will take $3.5 billion, and that's where we are. actually $3,470,000,000. It's a pretty healthy reserve that will help us get through this year. So some of that money, no doubt, will have to be used to plug the hole, the chasmic hole that we are incurring in FY20. We'll probably close out the books in FY20 sometime in September or October. But the question is, how much do we use, if at all, of the rainy day account, the stabilization fund, moving into FY21? My guess is that it's possible we could use up to $1 billion of that reserve moving into FY21, but that's largely dependent upon what action, if any, the federal government takes
Okay.
in forms of federal financial relief.
So you're saying that we will dip into the rainy day fund to take care of anything on the state level that needs to be, I mean, basically what we're doing here is closing out our budget, and the state may have to dip into the rainy day fund for the FY20 budget. Then we have concerns because the Student Opportunities Act wasn't that going to be partially funded by that, the rainy day fund?
It was supposed, it's designed to be funded by recurring revenues, not one-time revenues, as part of programmatic spending.
Okay.
And we were supposed to build in the transportation elements of the circuit breaker formula over 4 years, beginning in this FY21. So, I'm urging, the letter that I sent out to my House and Senate colleagues 2 days ago was urging them to fully fund each phase of the Student Opportunity Act. Basically, and Senator Rush and I are both in agreement, we need to protect our cities and towns. We need to protect our school districts. We need to take measures at the state level that affords the town of Norwood that type of fiscal protection. So that's number one. That's priority number one. And we start by not taking a step back on the Student Opportunity Act.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes, Alan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wondering if Representative Rogers would just update us on Norwood's application for a state of emergency due to the recent floods.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I spoke with Governor Baker at length after Senator Rush and I think it was on June 30th. We sent a letter to the governor urging the governor to declare a state of emergency for the region, particularly Norwood. I know that the selectman, the town manager, also that same day declared a state of emergency for the town of Norwood. We've been in conversations with MEMA, who has been in conversations with Steve Lynch, who has been having ongoing conversations with FEMA. I asked the governor, to maybe replicate what we did when the tornadoes hit Cape Cod. He said he was going to have his legal team address this. I also talked about all the homes that I toured, and I toured with Senator Rush and Congressman Lynch as well, down on Andrew Street, Rock Street, Cross Street, Plimpton Street, ravaged and devastated by a 5-foot river that destroyed their homes, particularly their basements. And many of them were finished basements, and almost none of these homes has flood insurance. So the governor was shocked that these companies were denying coverage invariably, home after home after home. He said that he would have his insurance commissioner review that. They are reviewing these denials, and Senator Rush and I are looking at relief mechanisms in the state budget to assist MEMA, because even if we did get some sort of federal financial relief, I think it wouldn't be enough, assuming we would qualify for it. So, I'm looking at least two areas that amend Section 2 in the budget. One would be the Division of Insurance. That's an item that's 100% assessed. The Division of Insurance probably generates about $110 million in non-tax revenue each year, and we appropriate some $14 million, and they assess the insurance industry, and that's how they pay for operations and for reviews and for their audits. So an additional $5 million would appropriate some $19 million, and not less than $5 million of that would be transferred to a new item within MEMA for a one-time distribution for any natural disasters that occur on or after June 28, 2020. So that would include the severe summer storm that Norwood suffered. So those are two mechanisms that I thought of, that I'm sitting down with the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Aaron Michaelowicz, and my friend in the Senate, Mike Rodricks, who's the chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Teresa? Teresa? You're mute, Teresa. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Just to go back to a quick question around the school funding, if you don't mind. Representative Rogers, you and I had talked a couple of times about, you trying to get additional funding related to like the PPE and supplies for the schools. And when we talked, I asked if you could also look into additional funding around the wraparound services like transportation, extended day costs, those types of things. Do you have any updates for us, or are there things that we can help advocate for?
Well, I do know that I've always been opposed to unfunded mandates. So if, to the extent that you have to incur costs on not only PPE and face shields and the like, and desk guards, but also bus and van transportation, that if those are mandated by the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth needs to pay for that. And to the extent that they don't, then what I usually do is file a letter to the state auditor, Suzanne Bump, and ask her Division of Local Mandates to review increased spending by school districts under Chapter 29, Section 27C, to decide and determine whether or not something is an unfunded mandate. And if so, then the state must pay that bill. So, you and I have had discussions before about unfunded mandates, and my position is either repeal or repay. There's no in between. So McKinney-Vento is a good example of that. The federal act that was adopted by the Romney administration, but it was costing Norwood School District $80,000 a year because it was unfunded. It was a mandate by the state. So we went to Suzanne Bump and wrote a letter, and she determined that it was an unfunded mandate, and then House Ways and Means Committee funded it. They have since, as you know, retracted from that full funding on McKinney-Vento, but you fight the fight you can win. And Mike Rush and I are still trying to find a vehicle that would insert language that you and I discussed, Teresa, about paying for those costs in all school districts.
Can I follow up with one thing, Ann?
Sure. Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, so just one thing to think about as you're looking for a place to insert that language, or maybe even in entirely different language. With the requests from DESE with the 3 models and the 1 model prospectively bringing back all of our kids physically in school at the same time. I know we're still waiting for more guidance from DESE around requirements and restraints with transportation. But I think most districts are feeling that more money is going to be needed for transportation because there's no way that we're going to be able to bus the same amount of kids on one bus. So when I talk about like the funding for transportation, I'm thinking of that situation as well.
Yeah, and I thank you for bringing, bringing that to my attention, that concern to my attention, and it remains a concern. I mean, that's why. I mean, even on sped circuit breaker, that's why it's essential. After so many years of fighting for them, for the formula, the circuit breaker to incorporate transportation, gets school districts to that 75% reimbursement level once they exceed 4 times foundation budget. Well, once you incorporate the exorbitant cost of transportation in that formula, it gets the school districts pretty quicker to that 75% reimbursement.
Yeah.
So that's a commitment that we've been fighting for years, and now we have it in the Student Opportunity Act, and we can't afford to retreat now.
I think your concern about the added costs to transportation is very valid. I don't see a scenario that the schools could use that would, unless the kids are not in school at all. But I don't see any other scenario doing anything other than add costs to the transportation. Anything that I've read of. So, sorry. Yes. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, Mr. Plasko?
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Rogers, for being here today. Couple of follow-up questions or comments, and I'm sure some of these you're well aware of, but I still want to emphasize them. The October date certainly is not welcome news for the local communities, and anything that can be done to not just accept that date and work towards that date, but get it done sooner would be very helpful. You also talked about working hard to see that we don't have losses in school aid, local aid, held harmless, and so forth. But are you talking at the current year's level, or are you talking at House 1 level? What level are you talking about, or do you think is realistic?
I'm talking at, House 2 level, Mr. Chairman. I'm talking about usually in normal times, and these are not normal times, the governor would come out with his House 1 recommendation in the odd number of years, House 2 recommendation in the even numbered years, and the House and Senate would put something on his desk that's probably a little higher. I'm talking about maintaining what the governor filed, at a minimum, what the governor filed in January 22nd of this year. So that would increase unrestricted general government assistance by 2.8% over FY20, and that would increase Chapter 70 by 18.75% over the current fiscal year. So in terms of numbers, Chapter 70 for FY21 would be $9,588,465. Unrestricted general government aid, or UGGA, would be $5,077,551. So that's what I'm fighting for. But and I think it's realistic. Having had to balance budgets, having been in the shoes of Aaron Michaelowicz, the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, when you make something a priority, usually something else has to suffer for it. That's assuming the federal government doesn't come to our rescue. with regard to October 1st, I agree. October 1st, it's very, very late to settle a budget. After the 9/11 recession, we lost $2.5 billion in 12 calendar months when I was in my first year as chair of Ways and Means, and we didn't finish that budget until the day before Thanksgiving. So that was very, very late, as you can recall, for cities and towns. But we were able to raise taxes, borrow from reserves, and then engage in a series of horrific cuts, trying to keep full funding to the foundation budget level, because we had a single justice monitoring the legislature under the old Hancock versus Driscoll case. So yes, I agree. October 1st, very late. But on this side of things, I think it'd be disingenuous of me to suggest that we're going to get a budget for your consideration, a budget so that you can make appropriate planning for the FY21 before July 31st. So I'm hopeful that, sometime in September, at the latest, we enact and governor signs with an emergency preamble an FY21 budget. I'm hopeful more hopeful that we do it in the month of August. But to say July 31st, we're going to get it done in 16 days, I think is actually reckless, unless the Congress takes action tomorrow.
We know that's not going to happen. The other part of the equation, when we get our cherry sheet, is state charges. Any idea what, or can you tell us exactly what controls that and what's the likelihood of those going up? Because unfortunately, we have had years where we've celebrated that the governor and others have supported increases in local aid, and when we receive the local aid, we actually were no further ahead or even in the negative because the state charges that we received were so high.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's something to keep an eye on. I mean, like you, I can check in with DLS at DOR, find out what their cherry sheet projections are, but I would imagine that even that is still in a state of flux. But it's important, I think, that you raise the point and we monitor that. Because the last thing we want to do is to cancel out whatever money we're able to increase.
Okay, I think Mr. Mizuko had a question, and I'll take one more if there's one more person, but then we need to move on. Okay.
No, just John, we appreciate the states working with us on the CARES Act funding. The allocation that the state made to cities and towns allowed us to not have to enter into a deficit for some of our immediate costs. We know the next round of funding is available in October out of our allocation, and we appreciate what you've done with that, and we just encourage the state to allow us maximum flexibility with that funding when it's available. There were originally some parameters that were in the federal law that the state didn't allow, but increasing our flexibility gives us more tools to be able to solve the issues that we're facing, as every community is a little bit different. And also maybe holding on to some of that money. There was originally a requirement that it be spent down by the end of the calendar year, but the more we can hold on to it, some of our increased PPE costs and some costs as we adapt to new systems are going to be incurred over a year and a half. So maintaining access to and flexibility to that CARES Act funding is important. But it's worked well so far, in a solid investment.
Yeah, no, thanks, Tony. And, I think it's important just to maintain the dialogue because, when Norwood Hospital closed, they had some 400 patients that were already scheduled for surgery. And you know this. They were scheduled for surgery because their docs had to leave Norwood Hospital and go to other healthcare settings. They were prevented to do so under federal regulations. So we called the governor and several others. We urged the governor to seek a waiver. We were on the phone with Mary Lou Stutters to seek a waiver of the CMS regulation that would have postponed those surgeries for another, into September, because we were able to obtain the waiver and it was granted. Those 400 surgeries, most of them have occurred, albeit in different healthcare settings. So, to the extent that the state and federal regulations that are putting undue restrictions on the town of Norwood, please stay in constant communication with Senator Rush and me, and obviously Steve Lynch as well. So thank you.
Okay, Kelly, this is the last question. Kelly?
Wow, I feel a lot of pressure, Madam Chair, but thank you. I appreciate that. So the topic of Norwood hospitals come up. Obviously, Norwood Hospital is a for-profit hospital. I'm wondering what aid the hospital might be able to gather and how that might be addressed, and what talks there are on a state level to actually assist with that reopening. Obviously, it has cascading effects, not just on our community from an employment standpoint, because we have so many community members that work there, but also on neighboring communities, because really it is the only hospital within any local distance to here. Otherwise, you're going to Faulkner, you're going to Cardinal Cushing, you're going to Brockton, which would be really far away in a life-threatening situation. So I'm wondering what we might be doing on a state level to kind of help them out.
Yeah, the good news is that they have insurance, that they're not gonna. There was some rumors, and there were false rumors that they were gonna close for good. And Congressman Lynch and I and Senator Rush, and I think Chairman Plasko and Tony Mizuko were there as well last week, meeting with the owners of the hospital and the whole system, the Steward system, not only maintaining their commitment to fully reopen the hospital through 3 different phases, but to invest large sums of money to make it one of the best hospitals in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, since we haven't built a hospital since the last decade. I think it was like 1990s sometime. But the further good news, and you alluded to this, Kelly, is you can't put a price tag on the invaluable asset that we have always had as a town, knowing that we have an emergency department right down the road from our homes, from our loved ones, because tragedy can strike at any time, and knowing that the ED is right down the road, you can't put a price tag on that. The good news is they're shooting to be reopened sometime in the next 52, 55 days. And then phase 2 would be in the next 120 days, and then phase 3 is sort of longer term. So the type of relief, Health and Human Services, phone with Secretary Sutters, had to be 2 weeks ago now. They're working with EOPS to see if they can not only provide hospital relief, notwithstanding the fact that they have 2 insurance policies, but also some sort of mitigation so that this does not happen again. This type of flooding does not happen to our beloved hospital. The good news is that they are insured. The bad news for the homeowners is that they're largely uninsured or underinsured.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John, for being with us tonight. You're welcome to stay, but we do have some business that we have to do today. Have to get done. We got to pay the bills, I guess, right? So
thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate everything that you do on behalf of the people in Norwood and everyone on the call. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
So next thing up on our agenda, if I can find my agenda. Anybody get on the agenda there?
Municipal relief transfers.
It's on the screen.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't see that because I have to watch everybody that was on the screen. Okay, municipal relief. Okay. All right, who's going to speak to us on this?
Tom, do you want to take it or do you want me to do it?
That's fine. I'll take the lead. So the first one we have is from the police department, and we have Chief Brooks here. So why don't you on this one, Chief, take over?
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Madam Chair. You know, we had done an earlier transfer. We were in the midst of COVID, and that transfer, we appreciate you putting through. This, the second transfer also comes from really the same account, and we've talked about this before, that we always have underspending in the paid holiday account because of the ability of officers to not take the money, but to rather use it in time off. The other side of that, and we've talked about this before, is that we have to fill those shifts when they take that time off. What we were seeing this year with all that's going on is not only that affect underway, but officers were not taking any time off at all. Everybody was confined to home. Officers were not taking time off. We had a little bit of overtime that we wouldn't normally have. By the same token, we could see that after July 1st, which is the second half of our holiday year, because it's on a calendar year, at the early part of our fiscal year, that they would begin to be putting in for time off, and we would have to spend more than we normally spend on shift vacancies. And so what we decided to do is shift some of our firearms training into the spring, and did not only our spring firearms training, but pulled up our fall firearms training as well, which was good fiscally, I think, but also led to some ammunition, which did lead to some ammunition costs. And we also needed to purchase some protective equipment, again, for reasons having to do with some of the things that were going on. So that's in essence what that funding is would go to. And like I say, it comes out of the salary accounts, particularly paid holidays.
Anybody, any questions for?
No,
Chief?
excuse me, this is a transfer within the budget, no additional funding over and above the budget, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. It's from within the police budget.
Thank you very much.
So Madam Chair, do you want to take a vote on this now, or do you want to hear them all and take one vote?
Why don't we hear them all so that everybody can get their information in, and then we can take it later and people don't have to stand by.
Okay, so the next request is in general manager salaries. Basically, this is caused by a long-term illness in the office, and we've had to cover the position with temporary help, $7,000. And all of these are coming to, we actually had a very good favorable interest rate this year on many things, so better than the budget. So I believe we had 170,000 left in the interest budget. So we decided to just take each of these that I'm going to talk about from that position. So again, as Mrs. Langone said, these are not additional, costs that are being appropriated. They are just merely moving from one item to another, as we can do in the last 2 months through the municipal relief mechanism. Any questions on that?
Well, I was just going to say, they are additional costs. We've incurred additional costs. It's just luckily that we have some money in this other account that we can use to cover those costs.
Right, but we're not asking the taxpayers to generate.
Right. Yes, okay.
Okay, if there's no questions on that, the next one is town council, $106,000. This is not by a combination of things, but mostly settling the lawsuit at the airport. One of the options we have on settling payments of lawsuits is to defer this and just let it go as a deficit and into the recap that we're about to do. But then it's that much less money we have available in fiscal 21 budget. So where we have the money available, management's recommending that we pay that this year and be done with it.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Bob.
So on this particular item, the town council, is this the final town council bill related to this particular lawsuit?
Related to the implementation of last year's suit, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Building commissioner salaries, we actually did a transfer in this, mostly because of a retirement. We did a transfer at the town meeting, at the special town meeting. I'm not sure particularly whether this was a underestimation of what was going to happen, but I think we did have some pressure from the year-end storm in this area. So the $3,000 transfer.
Any questions on that?
This
Okay.
is similar to the public works salary. This also, we had some overtime, definitely caused by that storm. And even though we have whatever it is, $2.5 million budget, that storm caused us to go over by $1,000.
It's pretty good budgeting. Okay, Nick, anybody question? No? All right, go ahead, Tom.
Next one's Medicare expense. This has to do with the fact that the schools are on a bi-weekly payroll schedule, and basically the last payroll for the fiscal year was paid July 2nd, and the taxes went into fiscal 20, and the lump sum payments to teachers, those are allocated to fiscal 21. So basically we're saying, since we have the money here, and it's, paid for the fiscal year, the way the disbursements work, it's better to clean it up at this time.
Is this something that we've done at this time of year before? I don't remember it.
I think it's because there's a bi-weekly payroll schedule, and usually a lot of times the payroll would have been paid later, so the related tax would have been clearly in the next fiscal year. So I think this was a little unanticipated timing surprise. But it should help us relieve a little. We always kind of have a very tight Medicare funding because people such as John Carroll that weren't subject to Medicaid, when they come off the rolls and they're replaced by people like Tony that have to pay into the Medicare system, and we as employers have to match that amount. That amount is kind of hard to predict who's going to be retiring and adding to the pressure. So this Medicare budget's always been kind of a tight one, and so we think that paying this now would help free that up for next year.
Okay. Any other questions on this?
So if I may, so basically this is a payroll timing issue. This is $47,000 that would have been expended in FY21, but because of the timing of the payroll, it falls into FY20. There's really no additional funding. So this looks pretty
just a crossover of years, and
thank you.
So the total of these is 164 on this page. The chief's request was 30,000. His is coming directly from his budget. These 164,000 are coming from the interest expense budget. Mechanically, Madam Chair, it's a lot easier for us to take one vote on all of these.
Anybody?
I have no problem with that. I think we see enough documentation here, and I know I don't have any problem with any one of them.
Alan, anybody? Any comments? Okay. We'll do that after. We'll go through all of them and then we'll take them. Okay. All right. So
that is all of the municipal relief.
Okay. So then we go up to the reserve fund transfers.
So do you want to do the municipal relief first and then do the reserve fund separately?
That's fine. What is
So I make a motion for the municipal relief request that just became in front of us that Tom has individually discussed.
I'll
Second.
I'll take a roll call vote. Kelly? Kelly, okay. She's
Aye.
raised. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Judy?
Aye.
Alan?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Sorry. And I'm also yes.
Madam Chair, the next item is reserve fund transfer. This one's a little bit unusual. And it's all directly related to the fact that we had the storm on June 28th. And Mr. Cooper put together a schedule of kind of, some of these are still estimates, but the kind of known things that happened. You know, his list totals $96,000 worth of items, but you'll notice he has a column. The third column over says net amount required. So, for instance, the fourth item down, we lost a 2010 pickup truck, and we need to replace that, but we're not really asking the Finance Commission to replace that with this budget, but we're asking for some money to rent a van over the next couple of months so they can figure out how to replace that. And they might get a hand-me-down from another department or whatever. But so collectively, this column, without actual invoices in, total $65,000. We happen to have $68,686 in the remaining in the reserve fund. So management's recommending that we just set up a little storm fund and move this money in there and pay some of these might not actually be able to get all the invoices until fiscal fiscal 21. So we'd put it into a fund that wouldn't expire per se. So we wouldn't have any problem with unpaid bills.
So let's go through these things on the list here for a moment. Who wants to talk to the things that are on the list?
I can take care of that, Madam Chair, if you'd like.
Okay.
The first few items, the rec department was hit particularly hard. We had some water damage on the Civic Center or at the Civic Center. And I'll address that first. I've gotten some questions from folks. You know, it seems like the Civic Center always seems to flood. And there's truth to that. And the reason is, if we remember, the Civic is a 100-year-old building that was built as a National Guard armory. And our workout room is the basement of that building. So when we get frustrated that the building continues to have issues, we have to remember that we're using the basement of a 100-year-old National Guard armory as our Civic Center. Its ability to absorb issues like this is limited. The particular rear of the building, we have spent quite a bit of money on drainage work back there to try to help that problem. There's some other plans we're going to look at. We may look at sort of flood-proof doors, but it is a gully at the bottom of that building that there's almost no way to divert all of that water out from. Nor is there an engineering solution that would be cost-effective to make sure that it could completely drain from that building under the building. So it's just a tough spot with an old lower-lying building, and it's the basement level. It's unfortunate it continues to happen, and of course we think the flood-proof doors are anywhere from $35,000 to $55,000 from the estimates we've looked at. This is just replacing the damage, incidentally. This isn't adding in the doors. We could certainly, we're going to look at that. It may not be a bad idea, but water has to go somewhere, so now we worry where else the water would go. Somebody brought up the infiltration of the building as we're doing some brickwork and some study for some brickwork and design around the building. That's not really related to the storm damage. That's sort of on the higher parapets of the building. That being said, it's an old building, and it's an old building that's always going to have some issues, and an engineering solution wouldn't necessarily be cost effective. That being said, we're tired of constantly having the gym floor flood. About $10,000 worth of damage at 2 of the playgrounds. And some of this could have been absorbed in the budget had this been earlier in the fiscal year. Storms are never great. June 28th storms are even worse. And we did lose the pickup truck that the rec department uses. It's a particular challenging time to lose that vehicle because it's the primary means by which they move supplies around for camps and the pools. We are renting vehicles still for the DPW and for facilities. As a result of COVID, we're still trying to maintain one person, one truck. So we might be able to find a beat up old hand-me-down, but we're down vehicles as it is. So this will at least get us through until the fall. Maybe things will ease up, or we'll have to adjust the capital plan. Luckily, it was only a 2010 truck that we lost. Town Hall suffered water damage on the bottom floor, which is actually about $15,000 in repair costs, as well as replacing the carpet and some dehumidifiers. That's actually delayed our VoIP project. It's delayed setting up office space to get Town Hall back up and open. So although the total damage is only $17,000, it's actually a larger headache in some cases than the Civic was. The fire department had, and these are still estimates, we think the engine 3 cost has come down in at less than that. However, we want the engine to actually run for a good week or two and make sure there's nothing that was missed, but the fire department had some vehicles damaged. The fire department, as you know, had a full deployment for the evacuation of the hospital, and their equipment suffered as a result. And last but not least, just some costs for the school department, mainly for janitors to respond to and check their buildings, as well as some school transportation costs that we utilized in the evacuation of the hospital. So all in about $65,000. As I said, this doesn't include any repairs or changes to the Civic Center. It doesn't include a new vehicle for the wreck, which lost that vehicle. So there's still, it's likely at this point, any further damages we have are going to have to go into the capital plan, because it's a change or a large piece of equipment we'd be looking at.
Okay. Questions, Judy?
Yeah, I think this question was asked last night, but I just thought for the audience, I should ask it again. What about any insurance coverages?
I'll have Bernie speak to that, but in brief, there'll be some. Our building deductible is around $25,000. So that, of course, is very frustrating when you have about $25,000 worth of damage. Not that we would have wanted more damage, but if there had been $200,000 worth of damage, we would have happily paid our deductible and gone about our merry way. So we're just hitting our deductible levels for buildings, which in some cases is more frustrating. Not that you want a larger insurance claim, but it's above that for our buildings. And then the vehicles, we don't have comprehensive on the vehicles. We generally won't keep comprehensive on older vehicles. We wouldn't want to whack our insurance rates with trying to replace a 2010 pickup with a brand new one and having insurance pay for it, as much as I'd like to whack the insurance company for it. For years, we didn't carry comprehensive on most of our vehicles. With police cruisers, starting a few years ago, we began, as we brought new cruisers on, adding the comprehensive to new cruisers, because we've had an issue in the last 10 years where we lose a cruiser and we didn't have comprehensive, and then the fleet is down.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Other questions? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Madam Chair, do you want a motion on this?
I would love a motion on this.
Okay. Since this is a reserve fund transfer, and I believe tonight really is the last night, am I correct, Tom, and taking care of the books, and we probably wouldn't have any other claim to be put into
That's
municipal.
correct.
Okay,
I'm sure
I make a motion.
the amount on the transfer is on the screen, 68,686.
686, yeah. 68,686. I make a motion for that amount of money to be spent on the items we just discussed.
Second.
Who seconded it?
Bob.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Kelly?
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
Alan?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
And I vote yes also. Thank you, unanimous.
Madam
Okay.
Chair, before you
Yes.
go on to other business, I just want to let you know that, it's been within the financial policies of the town, if we had some extra money left from the health insurance budget, we could invest it additionally into OPEB, and we did come up with $150,000, which we funded yesterday. So that brings this year's original contribution of $250,000 up by $150 to $400,000, and we had a little more room in the budget, but we wanted to be cautious that we still had enough money to add to free cash. So that was what we decided.
Okay, now do we have to
Okay,
take a
thank you.
vote on that?
You don't have to vote because it's within the health insurance budget.
Okay. Any questions?
I just thought it was good news for that we were able to do some, and it'll help our OPEB liability.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear. All right, anything else? Can we move on? Mr. McQuaid, would you please sign the appropriate sheets for us?
I will.
Thank you. All right, what do we have next? Discussion of May and June budget summaries. You all received your budget summaries. Did anybody have any questions on them? No? I do have one question, and I think I asked this at our last meeting, but I was a little confused about what we were doing with the Civic, the record department, and I'm vaguely understanding that not all of the programs that we had wanted to run and offer to the children were available now. And I just want to make sure that are we refunding parents on some of these, programs? What's happening there?
I believe we've offered credits, and most of our programming is now up and running. We have camps up and running.
Okay, but you've offered people credits that couldn't make adjustments to come to the things that you've got, or did we have to turn people away?
I'll have to check with the rec department on the specifics.
Okay, all right, thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Donnelly, do you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Before we move on, Emily, have we received any requests from the rec department to issue refunds?
I have not processed any myself. It's possible that someone else, Linda or Molly, did, but for the most part, we haven't seen a lot of them, certainly. If any, it was one or two.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We're trying to control the spending in that department and to have it covered by the amount of money that the folks are paying. So it was just a question that I sort of came across. Anybody have any other discussions on the May and the June budget summaries? And can I ask one more question myself? The budget summaries we got were after the transfers and everything were done, assuming that these transfers would be going through, or is there another one coming?
Those were prior to.
Those are prior to.
They're also, we had the last warrant today, so hopefully we got everything.
Okay.
Madam Chair, about $3,000 in refunds total have been issued since the beginning of COVID.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Hajar.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Tom, just to follow up on what you just said. So, we signed the last warrant. So, do you reissue the June to reflect the year-end actuals?
Yeah, we can do that.
That would be good.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions on that, we'll move on. Discussion of issues facing the town budget, including Norwood Fund and emergency funds. How are we doing? I guess that goes to you, Mr. Mazuka.
How are we doing in terms of what? That's a wide question. If we want to spend a couple hours, I'd be more than happy to go through the whole host of how we're doing.
Like a little synopsis of what is happening with those funds. Are we still collecting money into them and expending money from them?
Sure. So the collections for the Norwood Fund have slowed quite a bit, and actually in the last few weeks, what we've seen is some of the outflow has increased. We've been able to temporarily hold on the Mustang Food Pantry. The ecumenical hasn't seen an increase. However, we have seen an increase in calls for assistance since that happened. We're anticipating increased calls from the hospital. We have gotten a few of those. So the money in has largely slowed, but we're seeing a slight uptick in the money out from the Norwood Fund. In terms of COVID expenses, there was sort of a short-term hold off on expenses because we wanted to be able to close out the year, but now we're starting to see as more PPE and supplies are needed and assistance, we're going to start seeing our COVID funds, COVID-related expenditures go up. We're able to apply in October or November for the remainder of our COVID-related funds. We are hoping that the state will widen some of the uses of the CARES Act money. The reason being that the federal government put out a series of parameters and then the state really shortened that down. But one example, if we have funds available, and we don't necessarily know that we will, there's a need for additional vehicles. And we use this as an opportunity to sort of get the fleet where it needs to be because we're trying to maintain one person, one vehicle. There's going to be a lot of costs that we just don't know about as we go into opening our different buildings and opening the schools and things start to come up. So we're hoping that they'll allow flexibility. They've been, I will give them credit, they have been very flexible to date with what we're allowed to use our CARES Act money for. But we may find unique situations that are unique to Norwood or unique to a school building or unique to a police department that we didn't think of. And all of a sudden the smaller PPE items, those are easy enough to cover. But then it's what about new equipment that's needed? What about modifications to buildings and workspaces beyond just buying a piece of furniture? So we're a little concerned that as we start ramping up operations again, we're going to see some of those items. And then we don't know what the burn rate is going to be going forward. So one example on that is PPE for the schools with masks. So students will have to go to school if they go to school in place in person with masks. Well, of course, we'll have a supply of masks available for students. What's the burn rate? Are the schools going to have to give out 5 a day across the district for kids who forgot their masks or drop their masks or whatever? Is it 50 a day? Is it 500 a day? Nobody having ever done this before, we have no earthly idea whether they're going to need a $2,000 mask line or a $20,000 mask line or $100,000. So that's where we're hoping for the flexibility with the CARES Act. We were pretty conservative compared to a lot of other towns in our first sort of gathering of CARES or use of CARES Act money, because we now want to see, well, do we have an idea of what our recurring costs are going to be and how can we mitigate that? And one of the reasons I asked Representative Rogers specifically to make sure we have flexibility with that money is, let's say that in October, we could always apply for the whole rest of the money, but let's say there's $1.3 million left that we can apply for and we put in for $800,000. We may want to hold on to that $500,000 for the following fiscal year. There's been talk that we may be able to use that money as a budget solve. I don't know if I'd feel as comfortable doing that unless we're in absolute dire straits. The reason being that we still haven't run a full year in a post-COVID world and the regulations are changing daily. Yeah. So as we start to adapt and find out how we actually run programs, how we actually operate, I mean, if you think about it, town hall won't be open until probably Labor Day. The library is tentatively opening for partial hours the beginning of August. The Civic just this week is slowly opening the workout center. So we're going to anticipate that there's going to be, and it's not just an increase in cleaning supplies, but as we start to operate, what other costs are out there that we can't necessarily anticipate because we haven't operated this way before, and then we've got to operate that way and see what actually works. And that's across, really all divisions. And again, figuring out that burn rate of equipment that is different than it was a year or two ago. I also want to make sure that we all understand, while our numbers right now in Massachusetts are absolutely fantastic, they're not fantastic somewhere else and in other parts of the country. So we need to be prepared for whether or not there is an increase in numbers, and then we've got to handle that. The other thing we have to look forward to, if we are successful with a vaccine, we have to be able to ramp up and distribute a vaccine, and that falls to local public health. So we're in discussions now about how to do that. We're CARES Act money may go into funding for that. We would hope that the federal government or the state government would cover that, but there may be costs at the local level that they wouldn't cover, whether it's mobilization costs or temporary staffing costs or anything along those lines. So that's an issue.
Okay, thank you. Judy?
Yeah, have I got my mic on?
Yeah.
I have a question, now that we're talking about all this expenditures and so forth. My grandmother would say, what a kettle of fish this is. But I was thinking about the election on September 1st and, of course, the November. That's going to be very, very expensive. for what just happened. The legislature passed more voting by mail and so forth. And I am sure, Tony, that's going to have an effect in Norwood, how much it's going to increase our costs.
It should. Now, in theory, the state shouldn't be passing their mail-in ballot options and their early voting and everything without us, without providing money for it. But whether the legislature comes through with that is another story. So the average cost of an election will go up. The early voting, I mean, there's going to be Saturday and Sunday voting. There's a cost to all of that. Luckily, an election is not terribly expensive, but could it easily reach $30,000, $40,000, $50,000? Absolutely. And that's not counting, sorry, that's absent the CARES Act related cost. I shouldn't say the CARES Act, but the COVID related cost of running an election.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Tony. I guess we are up to next two meeting dates. May I hear from the?
Do you want us to send you an email on what dates are not good for us and start that way, or you just want to put something down tonight and we can react on it?
No, that's fine with me if that's what you choose to do. I'm flexible.
And are we talking about a meeting, 2 more meetings before Labor Day?
I'm going to ask Mr. McQuaid. What do you think as far as what do you see on the horizon for us, Mr. McQuaid?
Well, there's no more transfers we can make. The only thing would be if a reserve fund request came up early in the year. We're not aware of any. I would think in the next couple of months it's going to be a quiet period for the Finance Commission, because I think we just learned from John Rogers that we don't know much from what's happening on the state. But I think once we find more information from them, you could schedule a meeting. But I don't really see a lot of need for a meeting until September. But
well, the only problem with that is that maybe we should make we should set dates, and then if we don't need the date, then we'll cancel the meeting. How's that sound? Because if last fall was a little hectic when all of a sudden we had to have that special early, so I don't want to run into that kind of thing. So we'll just sort of keep our finger on the pulse here, I guess. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, you think? Okay. All right. So why don't we do it this way? You all send me what you have, what you cannot do on for the month of August. Okay. I know the school committee is meeting. I was told to go over their year-end things, and I would like to have them come before us with all of the transfers and stuff that they've done. So, yes, Teresa, there you are. Your meeting when?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. We meet next week, and then we meet on August 5th.
Okay. So I would say we'd be looking at something after August 5th. Okay, Alan? Alan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to suggest, why don't we do a plan for August 13th? Because that's after the school committee meets, and I believe that correct me if I'm wrong, Teresa, but I believe the governor is supposed to give the schools guidance beginning August 10th on the opening of schools. So, maybe we could have, the superintendent to maybe give us an update of, what's really happening with the Norwood schools at that point. What options they have, what the costs are, et cetera, et cetera.
I think that's a good suggestion, Alan.
So what was that date, Alan? August 15th?
The 15th is a Saturday. I would suggest, either the 12th or the 13th, a Wednesday or a Thursday.
I think the 13th would be better.
Okay.
from a personal perspective, maybe we should talk about fielding dates from the committee members and make it for sometime after the 13th when the school committee may have that data. I personally, I'm away the week of August that you mentioned there, so I would not be able to attend the 13th, but maybe subsequent to the 13th might be
Okay, and I can't attend that week either, so.
Okay, well, how about the 17th or the 19th?
Okay, 17th works for me.
That's a Monday.
I have a, sorry, I'm being the obstacle here. I've been invited to the pool feasibility meeting on the 17th. Pretty sure I have that date, so
How about the 19th?
19th would be
That's
better.
fine. 19th is fine with me.
19th
Works
is
for
fine with me.
Not that it matters, but I'm not available,
Oh, Tom will miss you.
but we'll have coverage.
Okay. All right.
So the
let's-
19th is not a good date?
Looks good. Teresa?
Well, I'm not going to speak on behalf of Dr. Thompson because I don't have his schedule before me. I can't promise he can be there that night, but I can check with him.
But that is a Wednesday.
It is a Wednesday. Yeah. I mean, a lot of things are up in the air for schools, unfortunately, as you all know. So we are hoping that August 10th, the date that Mr. Slater just said, is the date that we have concrete. We know what we're doing. We will definitely share that with everybody once we have it. We might have to meet again as a school committee after August 10th, but I don't know what that date would be. But I can follow up with Dr. Thompson about the 19th, if that's what you're thinking.
Please.
But you'll be meeting at 7, right, Teresa?
We usually do executive sessions at 6 and then our meetings at 7.
Oh, okay. Well, the only other date would either be the 21st of Friday the 21st, or we could do a Saturday or Sunday meeting. I mean, I'm sure that's not popular, or the 24th. I mean, the purpose.
Why don't we just stay with the 19th for now and see where they get, and if we have to move it, we have to move it. Rather than coming up with a perfect answer. Teresa might have the information, so why don't we just schedule it for the 19th and move forward? That following week and leading up to school is going to be hard because we don't know what the requirements are.
Okay, so we'll leave it as the 19th, but please, everybody send me your availability on the other days that week. Okay? All right.
5:30?
5:30, good for the working folks here? Yes? Okay. 5:30, yeah, fine. Thank you.
And just so you know, I'm not going to send it to you. I can do any night that week.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. All right. Other business. Anybody have anything they want to bring up? Yes, Mr. Slater.
Just very briefly, we had a Zoom meeting with the MSBA on Monday to go over the selection that the town made of Compass Management for an OPM. That meeting went very well. We're hoping within the next few days we'll get an approval from MSBA to sign the contract with Compass. Once that happens, we'll be off and running with them, and then we'll be beginning to start the process of hiring an architect, which is a little bit more complicated process and a lot more hands-on approach from MSBA, but very positive meeting, and we hope we're going to get going soon and get the ball rolling.
Great. Great. That's a good thing, Teresa. You have something to smile about today.
Hopefully.
Okay, and Judith?
Yeah, I'd just like to publicly thank our town management, our town employees for the wonderful work they've done. And I am particularly want to recognize Bernie. I understand you've been amazing through that whole thing. So I just want all of you to know that I personally was very impressed, and my friends who live out of town, they were impressed the way Norwood has handled not only the virus problem we had, but this current disaster, this flood. And I want to thank management for setting up some kind of relief for people who really got bombed with water. So thank you all.
That was all Tony.
And I couldn't have done it without Bernie. That's not rehearsed, but it's the truth.
Thank you.
And all of our teams, all of our team.
And we certainly appreciate the flexibility the Board of Health and the Finance Commission and the Selectmen have allowed us as we manage multiple crises. That being said, we're done for 2020, so no more crises.
Crisis. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. So, Mr. McQuaid, is it too early to ask you what we are going to end up with, or a guess what we're going to end up with for free cash?
Yes, it's too early.
Well, I thought I'd ask.
But I think it should be pretty good just because we're going to be starting with a pretty good pool that we didn't spend this year.
Yeah, okay.
Although I have to say, Alan and I, we usually come up with some good guesses, don't we, Alan? In the past, that is.
The operative word is guess, but yes.
Okay, does anybody else have anything they would like to bring up at this time? All right, then do we want to make a motion to adjourn, someone?
I'll make a
moved.
motion to adjourn.
Okay, Bob Donnelly made the motion to adjourn. Who's seconding it? Alan Slater. Okay, Kelly. Kelly? Yes, Kelly is nodding yes.
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
Judy?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Tom, please send our thanks to the management and all the folks that work for the town and with what they've done. It's been pretty amazing these last few months. We really do appreciate it.